Marianne. And hello, everyone, and good afternoon. Happy Thursday. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. I see some familiar faces and some friends on the line. So thank you, everybody, for taking an hour this afternoon and joining us for these ongoing Zoom sessions. I'm Matt Willinger. I'm Executive Director of Operations for Louisville Alumni. And we've got another great event planned this afternoon with Dr. Karen Freberg joining us to talk about personal branding and marketable skills to survive and thrive in 2020. And I know that we can all use some tips to help survive 2020. First, I want to introduce Dr. Freberg. Karen is an associate professor in strategic communications at UofL, where she teaches, researches, and consults in social media strategy, public relations, and crisis communications. Karen has written several books, including The Roadmap in Teaching Social Media and Digital Media Writing for Strategic Communication. Karen, thank you for joining us this afternoon to talk about these branding and marketing topics. Your classes seem really fun. I was telling you before we signed on, I was a communication student at UofL, and I wish I could have taken some of these classes.
Thank you, Matt. No, it's been quite a journey. I've been at UofL now for 9 years, and I just love teaching at UofL. The students are great, colleagues are wonderful, and it's fun teaching social media because it's constantly changing, but at the same time, you're constantly prepping for everything because you're like, oh, wait, I'm going to talk about this one platform. No, it went away or got bought by someone. So I'm constantly learning, so it's a lot of fun.
Well, I can tell you, we didn't even have social media when I studied at UofL. In fact, we were calling the internet new media during my community classes. So that's how long it's been. So I'm interested to hear what you have to say. But before we jump into the presentation you've prepared, I wanted just to check in with you, see how you've been and how things are with you and the family.
Well, thank you so much, Matt. Yeah, no, it's been actually really busy. This is actually like during the summer is a time where I'm actually working on projects. So I actually have another book that's coming out later this summer in August, focusing on public relations. So that's been keeping me busy. But yeah, just kind of prepping for the fall. But everything, is going well with family. Everyone's staying safe. And so I've actually found that in many ways, I'm actually busier now than ever. So, but I'm not traveling. So that's the only difference.
I feel like a lot of us can relate. We're home all the time, but we find ourselves even busier than we were before in our past lives. So as we're adapting to this new normal, it's likely we're going to see changes not only at home, but also in the workplace, from everyday expectations to kind of the desired skill sets that employers are now looking for. I guess let's start by talking about how are things changing in the job market and what are some of these new marketable skills that are going to be needed for professionals that are just now entering the new job market in 2020 with everything happening around us.
Absolutely. So like with that in mind, I'll actually go ahead and share my screen for everyone. So I can't talk right now. I need more coffee. I prepared a slide deck for everyone. And so again, I'm pretty much an open book too. So if there's, again, anything that I can do in terms of providing additional resources on this topic or even continue the conversation, I'd love to chat with each and every one of you about this. And so I'm going to be talking today, as Matt mentioned, about marketable skills for professionals and recent graduates. And this has been a topic that I've really, of course, kept in mind as a professor, that I really want to make sure that my students who are in my social media and strategic communications courses really take to heart. So I'm always thinking of ways in which I can help prepare them as much as they can to be successful in the job market. So as Matt and Marianne have talked a little bit about, I wanted to give also a little bit more information about my background too as a professor. So I do teach strategic communications and public relations actually at the University of Louisville, along with social media. And one of the things that I've tried to do as a professor is to provide my students with real world client experiences. So I'm really a big advocate of basically tying in the industry as much as I can in the classroom, because I feel in many ways social media, marketing, and strategic communications are very applied fields. So the students need not only know the concepts, but they need to know how to apply the various elements. And so at the University of Louisville, I've been teaching for 9 years. And so we've had an opportunity to work with some incredible local and national clients for our classes, including Louisville Bats, Kentucky Derby Festival, Louisville City. We had a chance to actually do some work with the Breeders' Cup when they were in town a couple years ago. Last fall, we worked with Facebook Blueprint which is their certification program. And then actually this upcoming fall, my PR class is working with Chipotle. And so I'm really excited to be able to have this opportunity to work with these brands. And so I try to keep in touch with the industry, because what I've tried to do to kind of prepare for these new marketable skills is to see, from the industry, what are the skills that they're looking for? What are elements in which students can stand out from the crowd, but also what are young professionals and professionals in general expected to know? So I think it's important for us to kind of look at that. So the current state of affairs for marketable schools, I think 2020, as Matt has mentioned, has been pretty busy. There's been a lot of curveballs thrown at us at a variety of different levels. And I know from a student perspective or in recent graduate perspective, I mean, a lot of students that I had this past spring, they were applying for jobs and internships. And then when COVID happened, a lot of those internships either went remote or got canceled. A lot of jobs were frozen. And so the students were all coming to me, they're like, okay, Dr. Freberg, how can we utilize our personal brand? What can we do to kind of really stand out for those jobs that are still available? So right now, I think there's a lot of concern about where the field is going and the opportunities that are available. But at the same time, there are strategies in which students and professionals can navigate and kind of really emphasize these skills a little bit more to their benefit. But the other concern that a lot of recent graduates and students of mine have, raised with me have been, since we went online midway through the semester, are there any, skills that they learned through that process by using various remote learning tools, skill sets, with Zoom and Teams that they could incorporate as part of their marketable skill list, for employers. And so those were some of the things that really, for me as a professor, really wanted me, and really motivated me to really step forward and say, yeah, these are skills that the industry is expecting to, have, but also they're also having the same concerns and challenges as well. So one of the things that I did share with Marianne and Matt is because of the, the questions that I was actually raised in getting, approached with students here at the University of Louisville. I actually wrote an article about the new marketable skills that are needed in the workplace. So a few weeks ago, I was actually named an opinion writer for Adweek. So Adweek is one of the big trade publications that we see here within marketing and advertising and strategic communications. And so they actually have an academic council that they're part of. So I was invited to be able to participate in that. So that's one article that I've shared that would be maybe, something to be useful. And these are skills, again, that are not just for social media and marketing, but it really can be all aspects of what we have to do, because we are seeing everyone's going remote. Everyone has to do some of these various elements. So these skills are transferable across all industries. So I just wanted to make sure that we noted that. So the other thing that I've seen too with young professionals and students, it's very competitive. There's a lot less jobs out there that, in light of what's happening with COVID. And so they're especially University of Louisville graduates and students, there are a lot of people combined for the same jobs. And so there's a lot of competition. There's a lot of things that students are kind of realizing, okay, how can I stand out? How can I utilize my personal brand? What can I do on social and digital that really would make me stand out? So again, as a professor, I'm always trying to kind of navigate these new expectations from the industry to kind of build into my classes. So this is where some of these new marketable skills come forward. So what are the top skills? What are the top skills that professionals need to have? So again, you don't necessarily have to be in marketing, social media, or PR to have these. You could be in nursing, you could be in engineering, you could be in any other discipline, because what really connects a lot of these disciplines together is we all have to communicate. We all have to do presentations. Social is not just dedicated to one discipline or another. It's transdisciplinary in many ways. So a lot of these skills can be utilized. And I think if you're in the hard sciences, engineering, or medical, if you have some of these skills, again, you would be able to stand out in your respective fields as well. So it's not just necessarily skills that marketing and communication professionals need to have. So one of the things that I think is important for us is writing.
Yes.
So, so writing is very important. And so this is actually the number one skill that all of my industry folks tell me. I ask them, I'm thinking, oh, it's going to be some sort of AR, VR, new tech, that's coming up. They're like, no, Karen, writing. So it's not just writing, like per se, like the typical research paper, but it's about writing in your own voice, like really having an understanding of who you are as a person, as a brand, and really utilizing the social media tools at your disposal. So if you have a blog, you can be able to write your thoughts, your interests, your passion areas, but it's about practicing how you would write in various scenarios, how to write an email pitch. Like if you wanted to reach out to someone to say, hey, I'd love to have like a virtual coffee chat, to talk a little bit about, what we can do, to better ourselves. And so I talk to my students about, the cold calling, through email, but then also reaching out through social. What's the appropriate way to reach out to someone on LinkedIn? But then also what are ways in which they can improve their writing skills for their writing portfolio. So these are elements that I think are still universal. So I tell my students, you have to be aware of writing for different formats, both from a professional standpoint, but then also be able to showcase your own writing skills through, again, blogs, writing samples, various activities. And so I talk a little bit about, this is more related to PR and marketing. So there's typical, items. If my students are applying for various PR jobs, there's going to be certain pieces like press releases, media kits that will be included that they need to have and, to apply for jobs. But then a lot of brands are saying, well, I'd be interested in to see if you have, some social media activities, or what about video? What are things that you're able to create? So kind of having a mixture of different outlets is important. And I think, remote adaptability, I think all of us are skilled with working at home. And I think it's important to be able to kind of show that skill. Like we're all able to collaborate, come to meetings. We're able to navigate the various video conferencing tools. If we are able to host virtual workshops. So one of the things that I did with my students this past semester is when we went remote, I tried to look at and see, okay, are there assignments that I can basically change that could help the students gain, this adaptability skill set that they can be able to showcase. So one of the things that I did is that I actually, for my graduate social media course, we were already going to be doing workshops where the students had to present on a related topic. So what I did is, instead of doing it in person, we did it through Zoom. I recorded the video for the students, so then they would be able to present to their fellow classmates utilizing Zoom as a tool. But the reason why I recorded it was to share that video link to the students, so then they could have that, as an example, an asset that then they can use and link back to their LinkedIn profile to kind of show employers, hey, I was able to do a virtual workshop in the midst of COVID-19. I was able to utilize and adapt through remote teaching. So being flexible, adaptive, and empathetic, being able to kind of showcase the experiences that you in work that you've done to kind of show that, yes, you're adaptive to constant changes or circumstances in facing a global pandemic, but also you're willing to learn new tools to be able to collaborate, share knowledge, and to engage in conversation. So virtual workshops are great. We all have done these, and these are elements that we can kind of showcase as examples for being adaptive and responsive. Service mentorship, I think that's the other thing too that a lot of people are looking at, is what are ways in which we are basically giving back to the profession. And this is anything from doing workshops such as this, but also helping individuals in the community, sharing resources, and being able to kind of show the impact that we have. And I think one of the marketable skills that people are looking for is saying, okay, you have your expertise, you have your knowledge, but what are you doing to better the profession? What are you doing to make sure that you are helping those who are coming out after you, as the new generation? So any type of mentorship that you're able to document, I think will be really, really well received. And as an educator, I'm a big believer in mentorship and service. And I think it is important for us to kind of look at what are ways in which we can document this, and how can we do this online and showcase this particular skill set, that we're not only building up our expertise and our brand, but we're also giving back. And we're seeing a lot more of this being emphasized as a skill that and something to showcase along with the other elements that we've done in our profession. So public virtual
Karen,
speaking.
I think that last part is so important because
Oh,
I think everybody has benefited from some kind of mentorship or has hit
mhm.
along the way. And I mean, I can think of 2 or 3 examples that, you know, in my career as I went forward of how people took the time to help, and it really meant a lot. So I'm glad you included that early on your list.
Oh yeah, well, thank you, Matt. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm a huge proponent for mentorship and helping others because I think that the more we are able to help each other, the field as a as a field, you know, it continues to grow and flourish. And I've been a big believer of that, not just only mentorship for young professionals and the future generation, but for us. You know, I look to, and I have mentors even in academia that I look to and say, okay, well, how can I learn from you? So I think that really kind of building that like service mindset, that mentorship mindset, we're all on the same team here, and all of us want to do the best we can. So it's really important for us to help each other out. And so I'm really glad that this has been, you know, something that I think all of us can embrace, you know, as a skill set. And so virtual public speaking, and so I mean, I think what we have to be aware of is are the different opportunities that we're able to do virtual, you know, talks, and similar to this. I mean, I'm really appreciative of the Louisville Alumni Center for, you know, hosting these events, because this is a great opportunity for us to learn, grow, and bounce around ideas. And so while I'm using PowerPoint here for my presentation, there's so many other virtual event presentation formats that are coming up like every day. And I think that as more events and conferences are going virtual, how can we help capture the attention, you know, for our audiences in very more effectively, you know, because with online situations, you're not going to be able to have like a 3 or 4 hour talk, you know, or workshop, unless you have various breaks in between. But holding attention span for virtual you know, audiences are harder. Like you really have to keep your, you know, points clearly. You have to make sure that there's interaction. So being able to have that experience is really crucial. But one tool that I also have been recommending to people as a new way of kind of creating more of an interactive and kind of different model for virtual presentation is actually Prezi Video. So Prezi, of course, is the interactive kind of not like competitor of PowerPoint, but they do have a new feature called Prezi Video, where they actually have a virtual overlay of a presentation that looks a little bit, you know, more interactive than PowerPoint, and you know, just a teeny, you know, image of the speaker. So it's actually a really cool tool that I would definitely recommend if you're thinking about doing virtual talks, if you're doing virtual workshops. Prezi Video has a free plan, but it also has a paid plan as well. So I would highly recommend that. Ethics. I think having an ethical framework is very important. And it's kind of, you know, fundamental. We're facing new ethical challenges in how we handle this, when to tweet, when to not tweet, anticipating various challenges. How do we respond to these challenges based on the values? And so I think that's an essential skill that we need to also embrace as a new marketable skills, or what values, what's principles, what do we stand for, and making sure that we communicate those values clearly. Because I think people want to be able to not only hire strong candidates, but they also want to see what are the values and areas that you're passionate about in terms of how you bring that these perspectives into the table. So I tell my students all the time that ethics is an important element in marketing, social media, public relations practices, just because you may be faced with certain situations that, you know, may catch you off guard a little bit, saying, okay, how would I respond to this? So having the practice, you know, of handling those situations, but then also being gaining practice on how you're communicating the values that you believe in. And I know in my field in public relations, we have, of course, a code of ethics that we follow. But it's important for students and young professionals to say, okay, what are the values that we basically feel are most important to us? Branding. So personal branding is definitely a marketable skill. It is in many ways really like one of your most priceless possessions, because it's not only what people know about you, but who knows you and what you're able to do. So as a professor, I can tell you right now that I've had more opportunities in my career because of what I've been able to do on social than some of my academic pieces, some of my work, you know, in research. But what I've been able to do is showcase how I present myself on social, what I've been able to do in my classes. So the clients that I listed before that have had a chance to work with my class classes at the University of Louisville with my students, that all resulted from how I presented myself on social media. So it's really about understanding your brand. How do you promote your brand consistently across social media platforms? What are the things that you want to be known for? One book that I would strongly recommend looking at is, it's actually called Known, but it's by a professor and marketing professional named Mark Schaefer. And he's written several books in marketing, but that's probably the best personal branding book that is out there, because it gives you kind of a walkthrough step of who you are, how do you define yourself, what are things that you can do to improve yourself on social. So really, Mark has kind of laid out the blueprint on personal branding in terms of how to present yourself on certain platforms, what content to create, how do you measure whether you're effective. But this is an essential skill. I think this is as important as like a cover letter and resume, because employers are going to say, okay, how are you presenting yourself online? I know Marianne and I were talking about fake accounts, on social media, and I always, tell my students, there's various ways we can find that out, not only for me as a professor, but other employers as well, to kind of see how many accounts you do have, how to identify them. But you also want to be able to be prepared for, any questions that arise if people find out, okay, can you explain this fake account? Can you explain why you're presenting yourself this way or that way on social, and which brand is true? So personal branding is something that is near and dear to my heart. So again, I have tons of resources on this as well. So if there's things that I can share, let me know. But then the
Karen,
other thing.
I'm glad you mentioned that part too, because as a hiring manager at UofL, and also through, in my past career being in public relations, social media was always one of the things that we definitely looked at when looking to bring anybody in. When we would start the interview process, I mean, it was one of the first things we would do would be, thoroughly scan the candidates, social media and see if there were any red flags or.
Mhm.
And I think their social media can either help your case, or in some causes it could even hurt your case. So I think
Yeah.
that's important, the way you position yourself publicly.
Absolutely. Thanks, Matt. Yeah, no, I mean, even for professors, it's interesting how I've been at U of L again for 9 years, and my students every year, they do their own searching on like, okay, who's this professor and can we find anything online? And one of the things that my students find out actually about me is I was a former track and field athlete. I was a 4-time All-American and competing in the shot put at Florida and Southern Cal. So they do see my old competition videos where I'm very intense. So they're like, whoa. So I have to reassure them I'm not doing that anymore. But yeah, that's, it's about first impressions. You want to make the best first impression possible, on social, but also be authentically true to who you are. And that really falls along the line of digital literacy. And so what I mean by digital literacy is not only about understanding the tools, but how to navigate them. And that kind of is aligned with personal branding. And so you can post content on social, but it's about understanding the context, the communities, how do you foster relationships on social, like who can you connect with? So all of the guest speakers that I've ever had come to my classes have actually resulted through Twitter. And so people have, various thoughts about Twitter. Some people love it. Some people are like, I stay away from that. But for me, it's like my Rolodex. Like I've been able to connect with people that I never would have thought of being able to kind of navigate, these communities. And so it's an opportunity for us to utilize these tools to tell our own story, to effectively monitor for trends and issues and opportunities. So there are people like employers and others that are saying, hey, I have jobs, like I'm looking for someone. And if you have various communities that know your personal brand, and they're like, hey, I really think Matt would be perfect for this job, or hey, Marianne knows, this area of expertise, you should talk to her. So if you're able to build a community in your brand, you're going to have individuals that will, help you out find these opportunities. So it's also, really important to understand this. So there's been a lot of brands and companies like Adobe, for example, that have really been heavily invested in getting more awareness about digital literacy, because if you're able to understand not only the tools, but the context, you become fluent in social and digital, and everything's basically social digital now. I mean, in all respects. And so this is not just an area that is important for marketing, public relations, and social media professionals, but it's everywhere. Like there's so many different touch points and opportunities here. So digital literacy is really an important skill set to have. But the last thing that I wanted to also reiterate too is I always like giving resources or what you could call homework. So there's tons, like if you're, having questions about personal branding or really any of these marketable skills that I've been talking about, a lot of these are covered in free certification tools. And so I'm a big believer of additional learning, continuing education. So Matt, you mentioned that there wasn't even social media when you're in school. So I tell my students all the time, if I stopped learning about technology when I was in their shoes, I'd be talking about MySpace. And my students are like,
Exactly.
what? Like, what? MySpace? I'm like, I know. You don't hear about that anymore, except from a historical perspective of social media. But I would really recommend like looking at some of these tools. So Facebook Blueprint, again, is Facebook's educational platform. They have a lot of lessons there. HubSpot Academy has free certifications on social media. So if you're looking at updating your digital skills, they have everything from social listening, from social media marketing. You might see a familiar face in their certification there. Hootsuite has one. So Hootsuite, of course, is a social media management tool. So they have their own certifications, but even their own platforms like Twitter and Pinterest. If you wanted to update your skills, with Twitter and Pinterest, they have free certifications for their platforms. So, they're good for a year. Again, you can take the exam and you can embed those certifications as part of your LinkedIn profile. They have like a little code that you can, add into your LinkedIn. So any of these additional skill sets will, again, help, amplify your understanding of the digital landscape, but also, again, tap into some of these new marketable skills. So I definitely want to open up to Q&A right now because I want to make sure that we have plenty of time to answer any questions. But before we go that, I wanted to make sure that I shared with everyone my contact information. So this is my email. I'm pretty much connected with my phone. I'm pretty much connected with all technology as well. But if there's anything that I can do in terms of sharing resources, ideas, or bounce around ways in which I can help out, with personal branding or identifying marketable skills that you can promote, I'm an open book. I love helping everyone out on these topics. And so I'd love to connect also with everyone on social. I'm again, pretty much everywhere, even TikTok, which I'm still learning, but I definitely want to continue the conversation. So I will definitely stop sharing my screen now to open up to questions.
Karen, one of the questions we received was in regards to careers that are high tech, in terms of maybe like nursing or installing broadband. What are the marketable skills transferable? I mean, it sounds like some of those are in terms of the writing and flexibility, but they were looking for a little advice if you're in one of those careers.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Yeah, I mean, I think if you're in a high tech field, I mean, I think that's one of the things too that there are still some skills like public virtual speaking. I think that would be still an essential skill that across the board everyone needs to have. So I think that's one of the things that I tried to do today was kind of highlight some skills that are universal across the board. Because I think everyone's in the same boat, right now with COVID. They're like, okay, how can I basically articulate this? So you have your specific high-tech industry expertise areas that are very specific into that particular market. But then if you're looking at, okay, how can I differentiate myself from other competitors? And I've always believed if you're able to take a skill set from another area and bring it into your own field, then it is, you look like a genius, basically. So for me, I've always tried to kind of see, okay, what can I learn from psychology? My mom, she teaches neuroscience, so I try to bring in that, and my dad was in marketing, so I'm like, okay, I'm going to go over here. But then I have friends that are in engineering, and so I'm thinking, okay, how can I tie in what they're doing into my work? So it's about kind of seeing if there's pieces in which you can add in from other fields into your own to see, again, you're going to get kind of an integrated mix of skill sets.
One thing I was hoping you could speak to is as people are undergoing these job searches is the need for perseverance and for keeping a positive attitude, because I mean, you can equip yourself with all of these tools and skills that you mentioned before, and you might be a perfect fit for this company, but it just doesn't work out. I know coming out of UofL, I was ready to take on the world, and I can tell you to this day, I sent 63 resumes before I got my foot in the door and was able to start. So if you could speak, how do you talk about that with your students in terms of keeping a positive attitude as you go through this job search? Because you're going to get a lot of no's before you get a yes.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I tell my students, yeah, perseverance is very important. So a no today may turn into a yes down the line. And I actually went on the job market with the recession. I was in the boat where everyone was like freezing up their job searches. And so like I had one friend that had like 10 on-campus visits, but like 8 of them got canceled and just because of the job market. They're like, no, we don't have the funding. And so I completely sympathize with my students now. I'm like, I totally understand. But I think it's about, again, kind of having a positive mindset and saying, okay, this opportunity didn't work. I'm going to see what worked, what didn't. And so there's some circumstances that you just can't control. There's some jobs that my students have applied for where they're like, we don't have the funding, like everything's frozen, like we got the higher ups. But it's about continually investing in those skills, kind of saying, okay, what can we do now to take action? And I've always tried to think about like, if I, say, okay, this was a bummer, I didn't get this job, what can I do to better myself? And so with my students, a lot of my students this past semester were kind of in that boat. They're like, I'm applying for jobs, but a lot of these opportunities have been closed. I'm like, well, let's come together, brainstorm some ideas, and then get you connected with someone, now. So then you're able to formulate that relationship. So if an opportunity comes up in the future, they're able to help you out in that. And so I had a student who was able to do that, and so she's now basically, she has a mentor that's able to make her, get, connections in the industry. So she's going to be in my PR class right now. So my goal has always been to say, okay, how can I help you get connected? So I think the important thing is having advocates to support your work and to be with friends, colleagues, and so you're able to bounce around ideas. And so the more people we can kind of support, the better off. So I think that's really a key thing that we need to kind of be aware of.
Yeah, I agree. Leveraging that personal network
Mm-hmm.
as you do that can be super important. We have a question on the chat from Stacy Nash. She says,
Mm-hmm.
you complete most of these goals from having a personal website. She said, I find managing my many social media accounts to be very time consuming.
Yes, I'm a big advocate for having a personal website. I've been online now since 95. So I'm dating myself a little bit. I actually started my website when I was 13. My parents actually gave us all like our own personal domain name. But yeah, I mean, I feel with your website, that is your hub of your personal brand. I think everyone needs to have a personal website, and whether it's from Squarespace, Wix, WordPress, I think it's an opportunity for you to own your story. So we talk a lot in public relations about paid, earned, social shared media, but also owned media. You want to have a place where you control how you want to be perceived, your messaging, your content. So I'm a big advocate for that. So a lot of this can be accomplished through a personal website, but you need to have extensions. And that's where social media comes for. You need to be able to share, oh, I have this new blog post about this topic on social media. I'm going to share this on LinkedIn, or I'm going to share this on Twitter. So you want people to come back to your website. And I've gotten most of my consulting opportunities as in social media and other projects through that. And so it's about having, again, that mindset of understanding how and why we use the various tools at our disposal, as well as differentiating ourselves. I think having a blog, having a website, still, it's one of those things that's standard right now, but it's a way for you to kind of showcase your personality, your interests. I love a lot of different things, like in terms of my own interest beyond academia. And so what I would recommend is if you're looking at how do you differentiate yourself, look at what other people are doing, seeing what works for them, what, is, some things that you can bring to the table into your personal blog. And everyone has a unique voice. And I think the more we're able to share that and advocate for this, the better. And I've always told my students, you have to be your best advocate. You essentially have to be your own best PR person. And from someone who is teaching PR, I'm like, well, I need to practice what I'm preaching. And our most important client is ourselves. So I think that's really important. But yeah, that's such a great question.
I think that last point was so important. Is you have to be able to talk about yourself and be able to promote yourself. Because if you're not an advocate of yourself, then nobody else will be either.
Right. Yeah.
We have a question from one of your former students and one of my colleagues, Amanda James, chimes in. The former student of your social media class, she's curious to see how the class is growing with new platforms like TikTok as a part of the social media projects at the end of the course. She says, are various companies starting to dabble more into those type of platforms?
Yes. Well, hi, Amanda. It's so good to see you. Yeah, no, I mean, that's one of the things that I love about teaching social media is I'm always learning new things. And so I actually had a bit more work to do because I actually did a sabbatical last spring in Australia. So I didn't teach my social media class. So I had like every semester I have to update my classes because everything changes in social. And so this year was a big step into, like, I didn't even have to talk about TikTok. And so basically I'm like, well, I need to cover all of this. And so in terms of what we were doing for classes, we worked with the Louisville Bats for my undergrad class, and then also from the Kentucky Derby Festival for my graduate class. But for our class for the Louisville Bats, one of the things that we were really planning on is really launching an effective TikTok strategy for them, because they said, well, we have an account, we're verified. I'm like, well, that's awesome. But they're like, we haven't really posted anything yet because we really don't know what we can do. So because we didn't have the opportunity to actually cover and help the team out with it again, because, you know, of course the season has been postponed, what we did was emphasize some strategy ideas on how they could utilize TikTok. And so for me, that actually meant, as a professor, I had to go on TikTok and be like, okay. And so TikTok is one of those things where, like, if you, once you get on, like, you can spend like a couple hours just looking at videos. And so I actually found that, you know, happening to myself. But I would recommend, if you wanted to look at some really good tools, I would recommend following a company called Convina, Conviva. Yes. So they actually have a whole playbook on TikTok strategy and also highlighting metrics, you know, for how to analyze TikTok effectively. So I've seen a lot of brands do really, you know, some really, really good work, including Chipotle. And so I actually they were one of the first brands that I thought really utilized their presence on TikTok very effectively from a brand standpoint. Because I think when you looked at Snapchat a few years ago, people were like, well, that's kind of like messaging. That's what your friends, when brands get into the conversation, you're like, I don't want to talk to brands here. And so that was one of their challenges. But with TikTok, they were kind of feeling the same way, but Chipotle was able to make it relevant, you know, in terms of their content. And so that was one of the things that I thought, well, this is something to use. So yeah, so there's great examples of brands on TikTok, but there's also still lots of opportunities. And from a university standpoint, one account that I follow that I think has done a really good job, and I'm an alum, is the University of Florida. They've done a really good job on their TikTok account, you know, from a higher education standpoint. But I think there's a huge amount of opportunity there. I'm still learning. I actually, when I made the announcement that I was going on, actually using Chipotle as a class client, I actually made a TikTok video because I'm like, okay, if Chipotle is on TikTok, I have to be on it. And so I actually asked my students, I'm like, okay, this is an older millennial trying to be cool on TikTok. How did I do? And they're like, you did all right, Dr. F. I'm like, all right, I'll take that. Still have work to do.
We've spent a lot of time talking about students that have just graduated. If there are people that are watching that have maybe been in their career for maybe 10 to 15 years, not new into the career, but maybe you know, spinning their wheels or maybe looking to pivot to a change, what advice or what kind of advice can you share with them or to give them to stay positive throughout 2020?
Yeah, definitely. I think what's interesting is I've had lots of conversations with, you know, friends of mine who have been in the industry for 10 plus years. And I think one of the things that we all realize is we're all in this together. And I think what I've actually found for those who are, you know, 15, you know, or 10 or 15 years out of the industry, I've always encouraged them. I said, you know, reach out to new networks, make new contacts to kind of learn, you know, like I've had a lot of people come to me and they're like, I need to get updated with digital literacy. I need to get up to date with these certifications. How do I go about doing that? And I've actually paired up some of my friends with students because they've been interested in saying, I need to learn more about TikTok because my kids are using it. We're getting talked to about what we need to do. And they don't want to ask their colleagues, but they're like, okay, how can I get help? So I've actually paired up a few of my students with some of my friends for reverse mentorship. So they're able to help my students, you know, saying, okay, here's the industry, here's what it's really like, you know, that you don't necessarily learn it from the textbook, but on the flip side, students are able to say, okay, here's how to do this challenge on TikTok, or here's the do's and don'ts, that if you want to market to us, here's what you do. So I've been encouraging them to kind of build those networking connections. But I feel too, in this day and age, learning is always important. I emphasize this with my students. Learning does not end after graduation or after this class. And like, yeah, we're done, Dr. Freberg. I'm never going to go back to school. I'm like, there's this thing called school of life where you're constantly a student. I'm still learning. And so I think it's just, kind of investing in the tools, being there. Again, mentorship, is very important, looking at opportunities to get, more exposure, more connections. And I feel that would be my advice, is to expand your network, expand your understanding of, taking some time each day to kind of learn something new. It doesn't have to happen all in one day, but just doing a little bit every day is very, very helpful.
I think that's great. Karen, thank you so much for spending some time with us over our lunch hours. We really appreciate, we know how busy you are, so to come on here and share your presentation and to tell us about some of these valuable resources, I hope has been as beneficial for everybody else listening as it was for me. Before we let you go, in closing, for those that are watching live, or we will re-air this, on our social media and on our website, what's the one key takeaway? I mean, we've been listening to you for about 45 minutes now. If people only remember one thing when they sign off, what is it that you want them to take away from this chat?
I would say that we're all in this together. This is a situation that, in terms of marketable schools, that every aspect of society is facing, whether it's current students, former students, graduates, young professionals, established professionals. We're all in the same boat here. We're experiencing some of the same concerns and challenges, but with that, I also feel with every challenge, people come together to help each other. So there's always those that will be there to help out. And I think too, one thing that I would kind of summarize too is that we're all in, not only in this together, but there are people here helping. And so I definitely want to encourage everyone who's watching this to reach out. I definitely want to help out in a way if there's things that I, can do. I also want to extend an invitation, to see if there's anyone that would be interested in learning more about what we're doing at, in our courses and social media. I definitely want to open up the door for people who want to maybe say, okay, what is it like to, sit in a personal branding class? I definitely want to feel, inclusive in all this. We're all in this together, and we'll get through this. We'll make sure that everyone has the marketable skills that they need to succeed and achieve their goals.
I think that's a great way to end this conversation. So thank you again. As Karen said, if you have any questions or follow-up, please reach out to her directly. If not, get a hold of myself or Marianne and we can connect you. We'd be happy to. We hope everybody enjoyed this session. Please continue to monitor our social media and our homepage for more upcoming virtual engagement opportunities throughout the summer and into the fall of 2020. And I hope everybody enjoyed this session. Have a great afternoon and enjoy the rest of your lunch.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Marianne, for this opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Freberg.
All right. Have a good day.